Let's get the miners behind us now, only the miners, and every other union in this country to bring her down to her knees.
The sound of angry steelworkers striking for more pay. The bitterness will linger on long after the strike has ended. For this is Port Talbot, a town which in the last 10 years has added over £2.5 billion to the nation's economy in steel alone. But it's fear that lies behind the anger. Fear of unemployment, industrial decay, and yet another South Wales depression. But there was another sound to be heard here last week, the sound of nostalgia for the days when this town had a future. It's a close community. The men work together and spend their free time together. It's no cliche to say that the men are bound together by rugby, steel and singing. 70 of the 90 men in this choir depend on the Margam Steelworks at Port Talbot for their living. But when they returned from a triumphant tour of Canada last year, they found a shadow over their futures. There were rumours of big redundancies in steel. Only a few years ago, the Margam Works looked forward to an £800 million expansion. On January the 17th, British Steel released their plans for survival. In the Tybark Rugby Club, cynical strikers learned the details of the cuts that have hung over them for more than a month. The news was out. 4 of the 5 blast furnaces were shutting down, and over half the workforce were heading for the dole queue. Nearly 7,000 men had lost their living. For 3 decades, the Margam Works has been the skeleton on which the economy of Port Talbot hung. In the days when it provided jobs for over 20,000 men, it was known locally as Treasure Island. Today, the treasure chest is empty, and 3/4 of the jobs have gone. Gwyn Davis started out as a 15-year-old apprentice fitter. The Margam Works took 28 years of his life and dropped him in the dole queue. When did you first begin to realise that maybe your job wasn't as safe as you'd always thought?
Well, I suppose the first slight doubt that entered my mind was about 3 years ago, I think. There was a very big investment program to come to Port Talbot, and this was stopped. And the doubt started to creep in then, I think. But the final time came just before Christmas, actually the day before I finished for my Christmas holidays, when management informed my trade union official, and we heard that my particular job was gone.
How did he break it to you, Mrs. Davis?
Well, he just come home and he doesn't talk a lot about his work. Yeah,
No,
never in the home much, but he did come home and tell me, and I wasn't particularly worried at the moment, but since then, it is getting more worrying now.
Mr. Davis, what do you feel about British Steel in Wales?
3 years ago, we were a 1st Division Steelworks. Today, we are a 4th Division. I feel bitter. Many of my work fellows feel bitter as well. I mean, you just cannot take 7,000 people out of the steel corporation, put them on the dole, and not affect Port Talbot. Because when you were talking about 7,000 people, you were talking then of families. So that figure grows enormously, doesn't it? If you only say an average of 2, and it's probably 3.
So, in human terms, it's not just 7,000 steel workers, but 21,000 men, women and children. And Inside Business has discovered that the shadow of Margam stretches well beyond the works. Frank Evans of the AUEW represents nearly 3,000 engineering workers. Most of the 120 firms that employ his men depend directly on the Margam Works for contracts. The strike has provided a glimpse of the future that awaits his members. When he visited T. Potter & Sons, a large firm with 596 employees, he found they were already laying men off. The firm relies on engineering construction contracts at Margam.
Well, Jeff, how many of the boys are to lay off now?
13
That's all in the steel company itself.
men working in the steel company, yes.
What about the civil side?
We've laid about 60 off.
Yeah.
But some of them have been brought back in on other jobs. But the hardcore is about 50 at the moment.
What about the long-term plans you had for expansion here? Does that make a difference now that the steel company ways have made the announcement?
Yes, since the cancellation of the development, we have shelved our plans to double the size of our works. And since this recent announcement, we've shelved indefinitely.
We've got a lot of men signing the vacant book now. And what we're hoping is we're looking around to see if firms are taking anybody on. There's no chance at all now that you'll be taking anyone on in the immediate future.
Not in the immediate future, no.
So to 7,000 steelworkers, add 50 engineering workers from Potters. Just across the road, Joseph & Sons make machinery parts for Margam.
Well, at the moment, we're still on 40 hours. The overtime being stopped. But for how long, I don't know, like.
What about next door?
Oh, they finishing today?
Kilburn and Collins?
Yeah.
They laid off.
They laid them off today, like, until the strike is over. So
What about A&R Engineering?
Oh, they gone bankrupt. But what about the future, Frank? Most of the boys here are worried. They got mortgages, they got wife, children. What's the future hold for us?
Well, all we can hope to do is put pressure on the government, slow down the redundancies, change the plans of the steel company, and attract new industry, and that's going to take time.
Craig Wigley's dilapidated workshop is typical of the small concerns that grow up around steel. In good times, he can find work for up to 80 self-employed engineers. Since the layoffs, his phone hasn't stopped ringing.
How many men are you down to now?
What of it? Two?
Two?
Yeah.
It's because of the steel company will strike.
Yeah, it's terrible, eh?
What about the machines? Are they grim?
We take all machines off site.
So the future looks pretty grim.
It's bad, terrible. Really bad.
Well, I got some men on my books, and I was wondering whether or not he would take anybody on.
Well, I get nothing. I get
500 of Frank Evans' engineers have already been laid off in 40 firms. When the cutbacks start to take effect, he expects unemployment to swell to 1,500. So for Port Talbot alone, our figure has already reached 8,500 men. And of course, their families. Men without jobs means housewives with less money, and that means shops with emptier tills. Megan Davis is already shopping more carefully.
Hi, morning, Mrs. Evans.
Morning, Mrs. Davis.
I'll have my usual French stick, please.
Yes.
And I'll have 4 bread rolls.
Right, thank you very much. How things with you and your husband?
Well, not very good. I've had to cut down.
Have you?
Yes.
Yes, everybody that comes in that's concerned with steelworks are grumbling, you know. Although people have got to buy bread, they're going to go without the luxury
Fancy,
things like gatters and pastries, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Corner shops are the first to feel the shockwaves of unemployment. The high street is next. The authorities estimate that 1 man in 5 will be without a job in Port Talbot in the coming months. For the manager of one local travel agent, trade shrinks with each telephone call. He's already had to lose 1 sales girl.
Well, I hear that from one of my competitors that he is down about 30%. Yes, but as regards to my own figures, they're around about 10 to 15%. Well, I have one party booking that should have been 70 to 75, maybe 80. It's dropped right down to 50. As a direct result through the steel company layoff with 7,000 men.
Supermarkets are better placed than the corner store to weather economic recession.
We bought enough sausage
Yeah,
last week, I think.
I got sausage in the
We've
freezer.
had those.
That's
We've got plenty left.
Bulk buying and low prices ensure that the sheer volume of trade keeps them alive. But with the state picking up the food bill for so many of their customers, future plans in the supermarket business can be affected.
It's 99 better to have that one, isn't it?
At the moment, Finefair are considering a new £4 million superstore for Port Talbot. With the grim news from Margam, that plan may have to be reconsidered. But even if they do come, 500 South Wales retail jobs will disappear. Our Port Talbot figure is coming close to 9,000 unemployed. In the South Wales region, it's risen to 16,500. But the biggest job loss is still to come, in coal. This pit at Maesteg provides coking coal for Margam, and its 476 jobs are at risk. Maesteg has depended on coal for over 100 years. If both its pits close, 1,150 men will be out of work. Lost steel production and cheap coal from Australia mean that Welsh coal is being stockpiled instead of sold. It's ironic that while steel closures were being announced, a handful of miners were still vainly pinning their hopes on a new coal seam. Union officials are more realistic.
Yes, my friend.
I see that the yard seam is ready to go. What about our face now that it's closing?
Well, we are not quite ready to go on the yard seam, but we have brought our programme forward from July to May. But the point I put to everybody is this. With external problems in the steelworks, there's every possibility the coal board would say to us that you're going to close and we're not going to have the chance to develop the yard seam.
Well, give us a chance to work this first phase. Wherein, as it's looking now, it's looking bloody marvellous. Yeah. Give us a chance to work this first phase, and I think it'll be fetching men back here.
The external problem is tremendous, and everybody realises this. It's not only Coignant, it's every pit in our area which comes under C.P. Jenkins, the production manager. The 4 pits have been named in the 21 that if the external problem from Margam prevails, that we're going to have 21 closures, and we could well have 15,000 employed.
But surely this government of today must realise what they are doing to the valleys, the South Wales valleys. They're going to kill them, totally kill them. With what they're losing now in Margam and Llanwern, the men from there, we as a valley, in this valley alone, we are going to be dead.
Some of these men have moved valleys 3 times because of pit closures. Their next move could be to the Dole Queue. The NCB was planning a new deep mine to provide coal for the steelworks and jobs for 900 miners. That plan is almost certainly dead. In South Wales, at least 7,000 mining jobs will go. Our total for lost jobs in the region has reached 23,500.
Well, surely the NCB owe it to us to go to a good seam to work after what we've worked for the last 9-10 years, down the 9 feet.
As steel cuts back, coal mines shut down, and the failure of either industry hits the railways badly. Only 30% of rail traffic in South Wales is passenger carrying. The rest is all steel and coal related. British Rail estimate their revenue losses at more than £20 million over the next year. The jobs of 3,000 Welsh railmen are on the line, and our unemployment total has reached 26,500. Gwyn Davis is not only worried about the future of 26,000 men, but also the future of his son, Graham.
It couldn't have come at a worse time, you see, because Graham now is trying his O-levels, and at this moment we're going through 4 possible apprenticeships. The British Steel Corporation was one consideration that we had given. So it's going to affect Graham, I think, greatly, and this is my biggest worry. So that is bound to relate to that then, isn't it?
Last year, almost 5,000 children left school in the area. Under 2,000 of them found jobs. For the boys at Graham's school, the steelworks meant security. Staff at Dufferin Comprehensive fear a cutback at Margam will alter the nature of the school.
The town as a town is going to change. We are going to change all things are going to change. The motivation of kids in school, this is the thing that I feel could, the expectation, they have this expecting to go to work somewhere, expecting to have expecting to live in a community where things are reasonably easy to come by.
The brighter pupils will still find jobs, but perhaps less satisfying ones.
Will not be able to have those anymore. They'll be looking for what you might call a lower grade job, which other pupils would normally have had. The apprentice types will get them, and I think it's the less academic people, the less intelligent people, if you like, who would be really suffering badly from this.
Already there are a great number of boys, an increase in the number of boys, who've made inquiries about the forces, the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. And
it's a bit early to judge that yet, I think, though, isn't it?
Possibly, but you know, some of our ex-pupils came to school last week. 3 of them, who were working in the steelworks, have already applied to join the Marines. They've passed the test and they've passed their medical.
Since the news on Thursday that there'll be a reduced workforce at BSC,
they will obviously be cutting down on apprentices. Now, how many of you are still keen enough to apply to BSc for apprenticeships? I do, thank you. Jonathan, why have you applied?
There's a wide range of application.
Yes, anything else?
It's near, I don't have to travel far.
Yes.
Get a job there.
Yes. What particular apprenticeship would you be interested in BSc?
Electrician.
Electrician. And at craft or technician level then?
It all depends. I will do my O-levels.
Yes. You realise that you have to have 4 O-levels for a technician entry?
Yes.
English, maths, physics being 3 of them. Right. You also want to work in BSc?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, it's a local firm. Don't have to travel early in the morning.
Yes.
I heard it's good money there.
Yes. But as an apprentice, you'll have the same money, never mind what firm you work for.
Yeah.
What apprenticeship scheme are you interested in BSc?
Welding.
Welding. You realise that this might be one of the apprenticeships that they might do away with.
Yeah.
And contractors that go into the works might be offering apprenticeships in welding that you could possibly apply for outside BSc. Would you consider that?
Yes.
Don't just apply to BSc or any other company. Apply to as many as you possibly can, because competition for apprenticeships in the area is going to be very, very keen. The further afield you apply, the better. It might well mean for some of you that you might have to consider leaving the area.
Some of the younger parents are already trying to take that advice for themselves. For sale notices are everywhere, and there are 10% more houses on the market now than this time last year. Even the Davises, with deep roots in Port Talbot, realise that setting up is an option they have to consider.
Can we check the roof, Mr. Davis?
Yes, certainly, certainly.
With less work, there are fewer potential buyers. The housing market is poised on the edge of a slump. Men like Gwyn are finding that their one major investment is beginning to lose its value.
Well, I would offer it 11,750 at the moment. I'm not sure about the way things are going to go just yet, but of course you know more about it than I do, perhaps.
Yes. With the position of the works, have you had other inquiries about people wanting to sell?
Yes, we've had quite a number of actually instructions during the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think people are not sure whether they want to sell or not really.
No.
But a number of inquiries are definitely down, there's no doubt about it.
It's always the young who leave and the old who are left. When they die, the villages and the valleys die with them. One of the few men with the skills to help West Glamorgan is the council's chief executive, Mike Rush. He and his team have brought 6,500 new jobs to the area, using a combination of government grants and aggressive selling. This chemical plant is his greatest coup.
Major expansion, late 60s, early 70s, leading to another 2,000 jobs roughly. Now some 2,300 people employed in the plant.
One announcement on January the 17th wiped out the achievements of a decade. Our total estimate of jobs lost in Port Talbot is now 13,000. For South Wales, it's more like 30,000. Over 100,000 men, women and children face the humiliation of living on the state. At County Hall, the Herculean task of rebuilding the economy starts all over again. Mike Rush and his team hold a crisis meeting.
Can have an enormous impact by any stretch of the imagination, and that doesn't even take into account the ripple effect, as you call it, in your technical phraseology.
Standing Conference has already taken some action there in preparing a document for the EEC, which you've all seen, on the way we see the EEC cooperating and helping the redevelopment of South Wales. It makes the point, in fact, in here that over the last 25 years, South Wales has lost 100,000 jobs from coal and steel. And that if we lose 30,000 jobs from this current crisis, the coal losses, the steel losses, the losses in shops and offices and so forth, that would be the equivalent of the last 10 years' work in bringing new manufacturing industry into the region.
We've got the regional perspective, but Pete, you've sought to apply this with Guy in the context of West Glamorgan.
We think it's going to be an extra 13,000 people on the unemployed registers in West Glamorgan. This is a very drastic increase, almost doubling of our current unemployment rate of 7.5%.
So taking it up to 15. Throughout the county, is that, or just...
No, there'll be pockets of severe unemployment, naturally amongst Port Talbot, and in valley communities like Cummer and the Upper Avon Valley, this will top 50%.
Well, talking of corporate labour, we come basically to the main problem at the end of the day, and that's finance, Tony. Now, what really is the impact going to be? Because an awful lot of figures have been bandied around. Many people will say of scaremongering, but what would you estimate, and it can only be an estimate at this stage, of the impact on our rate?
Something like 7% of our total precept income comes from BSC Port Talbot.
And what does that mean in terms of amount?
Well, we're talking about £4.5 million.
£4.5 million,
£4.5 million, yeah. And the problem is far more serious, picking up on a point of Gareth's. Not only are we required to expand services to fill the gap between need and provision, but our actual income base is contracting.
What would you expect, again as a rough rule of thumb, the effect to be upon our age structure?
Well, I think it's obviously going to be the younger people, the younger families are going to be affected by the problems that are arising, who are going to be more mobile, who I think are going to find a contraction of opportunities in the county, and clearly they are going to look elsewhere.
So
they're going to look elsewhere in the UK, they're going to look elsewhere and abroad.
When you say mobile, we're back to a 1930s situation, possibly, when the youth left.
We could well be back into that situation,
$500,000
yes.
left, in fact.
Yes.
Yes.
The government has offered 48 millions to offset the effect of redundancy in South Wales. But how many jobs will that buy? This stretch of wasteland is the spearhead of West Glamorgan's drive to attract new industry. But if they fill the site with factories, it will provide only 2,000 jobs. In the savage game of poker with the other development regions, Mike Rush doesn't seem to hold too many aces.
It obviously is a massive job with a massive infrastructure investment. And I again repeat the absolute desire and need of the county to be dependent on Welsh Office for regional aid funds and also for European funds as well.
What sort of funding do you think you need to attract industry here?
Well, if you look at the amount of money we've spent already, we've spent on this site probably with staff time involved as well, probably the best part of £2 million. And as you say, that includes purchasing. And as you say, there's nothing to show for it yet. And this is the problem, really, of getting the lead time for replacement industry. Works closed 2 years ago, not one new job on this site. And frankly, the whole of the Dewport site investment will, I suspect, probably the best part of £5 million before we get a new factory on here.
So what you're saying, Mr. Rush, is you need another 10 sites the size of this one, about another 14 factories the size of Ford's, just to replace the jobs you're going to lose over the next few months.
Simply true, yes. If you look at the job employment there, 2,000 in round terms, 14, and that equates to our approximation of the number of people out of work.
But the simple answer, of course, is that you're not going to get 14 factories the size of a new Ford plant down here.
No, I accept that that's so.
So really, you're fighting a losing battle.
Well, you put a leading question. It is a battle. I'm not prepared to say that we're going to lose.
It will take a generation to repair the economic damage to Wales. In Port Talbot, 13,000 men are trudging towards the welfare state.